All right. So welcome to expanding on site building with components to truly achieve no-code Drupal. So I'm Peter Hoyes. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Tag One Consulting, and I'll be presenting with Fabian France, who's a VP of Software Engineering, and many of you know him from his significant performance and scalability expertise and contributions to Drupal over the years. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Tag One, we work with many different technologies, but we happen to be the #2 all-time contributor to Drupal, and we have a very large concentration of core contributors. We're also an enterprise partner of the DA, and we donate full-time senior resources to help run Drupal.org, its infrastructure and tooling, so that the community itself is enabled to build Drupal. If your company profits from Drupal, try to consider financially supporting it and the project by either funding the DA or a module maintainer. That way Drupal continues to thrive. So to learn more about components, which we're going to talk a little bit about here in this talk, go and check out our Tag One team talks and our podcasts and our vlog. We also cover a couple of other innovations, including real-time collaboration and Goose, which is Tag One's open source load testing framework. So what we're going to cover today is a little bit about the what and the why of low-code and no-code technology and where Drupal sits on the spectrum. And then I'll hand it over to Fabian in the second part of this to discuss how we are closing the gap between the perception and reality of no-code Drupal. He'll discuss and do a little demo on Tailwind CSS framework and talk somewhat about some of the challenges around Drupal's theming system and some of the solutions and challenges that he's coming up with. So for those of you who don't know what low-code and no-code is, it's just simply a software development approach that requires little or no coding in order to build applications and processes. And a low-code or no-code development platform would use visual interfaces, very simple logic, and drag and drops instead of extensive coding languages to build things. This idea is not new, for sure. It's been around for 20+ years and lots of tools on the web. And ultimately, there's a massive sort of business and organizational benefits for being free from having to depend on or rely on software engineering resources, and even benefits to the software engineers themselves. Essentially, we get to unblock non-tech users like editors and marketers or designers to increase their productivity. You don't have to build everything from scratch, just drag and drop, and it gives businesses the opportunity to get some speed and maybe reuse things. We may be able to, ultimately get some cross-platform compatibility, and will ultimately, hopefully, be able to simplify and streamline several stages in the software development process, development lifecycle, such as debugging, testing, deploying code, and the almighty reverting. This has a massive sort of, implication for markets, in having low and no code tools and components. So for instance, internal applications, we can help improve companies' core functions like their HR, their sales or marketing and finance. Their benefits in customer-facing apps, for instance, like building very sophisticated UIs that have very rich user interfaces and mobile capabilities. And also maybe we'll be able to replace a lot of legacy applications with no code or low code technology, because there's a lot of old code out there in legacy applications that are out there. And with a solution like low code or no code, a company can upgrade these systems for much more modern approaches. So Drupal's been around for a long time, and it has always been low code or no code, even if it's rarely recognized for that capability, as much as other WYSIWYG site building tools like Wix or Squarespace or WordPress. How are we no code? I'm sure you guys are familiar with the term site building, and that's the perfect example of it. No code development. It's no code development that involves getting Drupal up and running and configuring options really quickly to build a very functional site, that covers tasks like content types and fields, building content types and fields quickly, or creating custom lists with views, specifying access controls, roles and permissions, and even setting up site navigation and menus very quickly. Drupal out of the box is pretty no code. But as soon as you want to do more, you have to write some code. And in particular, that's the case for a layout builder, which was a wonderful addition in Drupal 8. So some of the things that make it, though, low code as opposed to no code in this case of having to do more is when you have to do things like creating customizations or overrides to templates and layouts, or perhaps making one-off landing pages that aren't tied to a content type or structured content. And we all know that lots of folks add custom CSS and HTML in the WYSIWYG editors that are used to get some control over the layout and styling of pages. So end users are finding their way around by hacking things to get it the way that they want, right? And that kind of highlights the problem to a certain extent. Non-tech users need some control that Drupal didn't provide until now. So, on one hand, while Drupal is extremely powerful and secure and customizable, the downside is that compared to other low code or no code tools and CMSs, it's pretty complicated, which is why people don't immediately associate Drupal with low and no code. There's already lots of ways to do things in Drupal, many ways to do one thing in Drupal, but they're trade-offs sometimes with one or another. And you might not be aware without the benefit of experience and having used it. Ultimately, business users can have anything they want with Drupal. There's a module or 5 for that, including countless integrations and custom workflows or awesome admin UIs and end user experiences, and even infinitely easy ways to create views to data buried deep in database tables that most of us would ever cringe at having to write some optimized SQL query to extract. Drupal is, in my opinion, the ultimate cross-functional collaboration tool. For every type of subject matter expert, marketers, editors, copywriters, designers, developers, and stakeholders. Unfortunately, it has a pretty steep upfront learning curve when it comes to Drupal theming, which is not necessarily for the faint of heart. So cross-functional teams of developers and marketers really do need to engage with their tools at their preferred level, whether that is no code, low code, or high code. So, ultimately, I guess you can have the most wonderful site built with all the content types set up and everything working great, but then it just doesn't look as great as it works. Drupal's base themes are pretty basic, and they unfortunately look pretty outdated. WordPress has a big commercial ecosystem, and people are used to paying for plugins. So commercial themes are pretty good and usable for WordPress, and it's the de facto standard. But for Drupal, there aren't a lot of good commercial themes. Custom theme development for Drupal has been pretty expensive, and you need a lot of expertise. So it wasn't really possible until now, without writing code, to build a great theme. So I'm going to hand it over now to Fabian to explain how Drupal, again, is closing that gap to making it to being more no-code and in its perception as well as functionality. And he's made some great functional innovations that was previously going from previously high or low code to or previously high to low code to being even more low or no code with components. And he's going to demo the CSS Tailwind CSS framework. All right, over to you, Fabian.
We were here at Drupal theming is complicated. The base themes look really outdated, even though Oliviero and Claro have made a huge attempt of modernizing things. But I was more talking about the original themes like Seven or Bartik that were really bad, probably. Then I've tried in my lifetime several times commercial themes for Drupal, and they have all been pretty bad. It was always not the nicest experience. But with WordPress, for example, they have like a commercial ecosystem, and in this commercial ecosystem, obviously, it's much nicer because they are so used to commercial themes. So they're the de facto standard. So they have lots of nice commercial themes, but Drupal didn't really. So, and then the custom theme development is expensive, and you need definitely some expertise. So it was definitely not possible to now without writing lots of code, etc. So and Drupal theming is really freaking complicated. If you think those templates I'm showing is complicated later, even when I look at menu-main.html.twig, I'm like, wow, no way. Why is this so complicated? This shouldn't be so complicated. It's a simple template. It should be simple like that. That's my take on the whole thing. So closing the gap between the perception and reality of no-code or low-code Drupal, essentially. And fortunately for us, the tailwind comes. And we have 2021. We have a whole new world. There's new technologies like Tailwind, Alpine, React. And this Tailwind CSS is really a game changer in the industry. For example, and I know that because I've several people I've shown it to that had no CSS experience, that didn't use CSS, they use Tailwind CSS, they can nicely style things. And that was always the goal of the founder of that thing, that essentially everyone can do it. They've also written a book called Refactoring UI, where essentially they were already trying to give everyone the possibility to start theming without knowing so much. And then there's Alpine.js, a new kit on the blog, and it allows interactivity simpler than jQuery. We'll be looking at that a little bit later. And then last but not least, we have modern browsers, and they make styling easier than ever. So what before was really complex CSS to get layouts, etc., with Flexbox and other things that by now all browsers support, you are really in a great shape to do that. So what is Tailwind CSS? I define Tailwind CSS as a styling language that bridges the gap between developer and designer. And my take is that everyone can learn it. So backend developers can finally style things. So even if you don't know front-end development, if you're only a backend developer, or if you're a site builder, you can tweak things, you can change things, etc. And designers, on the other hand, can finally constrain their layouts because there's only a certain set of utility class, we'll come to that a little bit more in a moment, available. A designer can say, hey, you're not going to choose the colors, I'm going to choose the colors. So there's no more one-offs. Here we have like Lila, and here we have other things, etc. Hi Brandon, nice that you're joining. June, if you want, you can tell others to come more, so we get a little bit more people in the room. Would be cool. Anyway, designers can finally constrain their layouts. It's totally great. that you can build your own design system with Tailwind essentially. But how do you use it? And that's essentially 3 simple steps. You install the theme, you tweak the tailwind.config.js with your design system, the fonts, colors, and spacing, and then you start your site. And here's a little example. CelebrateDrupal.org is a completely open source practical Tailwind theme. So there you can see how this is used in practice. And it's really worth checking out to see Tailwind in action. There's another thing. Oliver Davis has made a little workshop on Tailwind recently, and he even built Bartik, like one of those a little bit more dated themes, completely in Tailwind, rebuilt it with Tailwind and Vue, and you can see it's a good old Bartik, but here you have all those classes, and using those utility classes, you can essentially style all those things. So, and this looks like this. You have like a flex wrapper, and then you have like a margin top, and you have an inline block, and all those things. And then this is like the link here. And if you're still confused, we're gonna do something different. We're just gonna head over here and do a little demo. So we have here a little test component, and we'll take a look later of what the UI is about, if it would let me edit. And we take a look at it, how this Tailwind thing is looking like, with a way more simpler example than what you've seen there with Bartik. So we're going to do a little preview, and for example, if I want to say, hey, this background is really a little bit dark, so let's put in as 300. Like, oh wow, that's much nicer, much lighter here. But now this is also a little bit too dark, so let's make this a 500. And okay, but now this we need to also adjust the headers. Maybe instead of using a red, let's like a gray, let's use a red. You can see I'm not a designer. This is really just really ugly what we're doing here, but you can see there's potential. And there's also a commercial offering for Tailwind, and I'm all open source. So there's also lots of free components. There's a community around Tailwind that are building things. But if you need, and or more like in the WordPress part, that you want to just buy something and use it, then you can purchase a Tailwind UI license. And I'm not affiliated, but I just like it. And you can use it as a learning thing, or even for your things. And using Tailwind UI, you can essentially build really nice things, because that then looks much nicer than if we have this component library. Here my ugly example, but you saw I was able to quickly build things like with rounded things, and it's not even that complicated code, and even a little flex item there. But here we have a Tailwind UI example. So if we edit this, then we are looking at way more complex code, but all I did essentially is I took this and I copied it over from the Tailwind UI sample. That's a free sample I'm using here. I copied this little menu part over to that, and using it here, and you can see I have here a nice code mirror editor for my template. Takes a little while to load, probably because I'm screen sharing. And then there we go, and you see it's really complicated, but really all I did was I copied this verbatim over, and then I put in like little placeholder here for the title, here for the image, and then I put this little thing in a little loop, like a simple loop. And Janie, for example, I can definitely teach you how to use loops in this little template here. So we scroll a little bit down and then look at how it looks as soon as it lets me. There we go. And again, I put in my preview data nicely of that, and now we actually click preview. And as soon as it is loading, usually much faster, here we are seeing the little the menu. And once I hover over it and click on it, I can essentially open my little user menu. And you see this is really styled nicely. So you don't need to know all those alien things. You just essentially copy things and you use it here, and it's nice. And you can do it. My sister can do it. I bet my sister can do it. It was so sad. My sister built a site once in Drupal 7 even, and she built everything. She had never used Drupal before. And she built everything herself, like the fields, the content types, like a huge database of things. And in the end, there was two things where the project kind of failed. One was time. There's always time. But the other thing was the import was a little bit difficult, even though with feeds, we probably could have made it work. But then was the theming thing. And I was so busy at the time that I couldn't help her, and then she could build it too. And so, but if she would had this tool, I bet she would have finished that project, and we would have a nice Drupal 7 site built by someone who's never touched Drupal before. And this is what I think is the potential of this solution here, and Tailwind essentially. Because in the long run, this is much simpler than learning all the CSS tricks. If you already know CSS, sure, you're saying, oh, I know all the things on the block. But I often feel that if you have someone who is allowing you to essentially doing things that you can rely on Tailwind, they will always have the nicest browser support. They'll have the newest features for you automatically. You don't need to learn it. This is like a long-standing problem. Like, what do browsers support? What do you support? How do you support it? And the various prefixing things, all of those things, Tailwind handles that for you. And CSS and markup really go together. And there was always this artificial separation, and this removes it. You gain all the best practice automatically, as I already said. If you're overwhelmed, it's a new language. Give it time. You learn site building. You learned how to export your configuration. You learned how to do it with Git. You can totally learn this. I'm sure about it. The live preview really helps. You can tweak it till it works. You've seen that in the demo. You can tweak it. You can use it. You can, in the end, it works. And there's thousands of snippets on the internet, one I've shown already. If you are underwhelmed and say you prefer CSS and this is just like inline styles, then just give it time and try it out. It's a new language. Just give it time. With live preview, you can be productive in no time. And if you have localized changes, it makes it's much easier. Because CSS, in the end, I've seen that on many projects that have grown over 7 years and more, they are in the end becoming append only, because no one dares to touch the CSS anymore and delete something, because it has side effects all over the site. So this is a huge problem, and was one of the motivation for utility first Tailwind based approach. And there's spam, sure, but I've never seen a team in my lifetime that was disciplined enough to do pure spam. And the other part is you often end up with 10 different font sizes, 30 colors, etc. And there are studies, GitHub, professional teams, really experts. They had like 10 different font sizes, and I think it was around 100 different colors. So yeah, even others, maybe it wasn't GitHub, but for another example, but huge professional sites built by world-class expert teams have CSS that's just not consistent. And Tailwind allows you finally to give you this consistency. So compared to Bootstrap, which is one design system, but every Bootstrap essentially wants to be the same, Tailwind is a bring your own design system, make your own design. And that's just fantastic. Every design change is easily visible in code review for an expert. Because if someone's changing the design system, you'll know. You'll totally know that this is now changing your design system. So this is perfectly cool because you can constrain it as a gatekeeper of that there's no new font size introduced unless the design asks for it. With traditional code review, I was never ever able in my lifetime to parse CSS and HTML and code review it. I just couldn't. It was just one parsing step too much. I can parse PHP, I can parse JavaScript, no problem. I can run it in my head, I can find logic errors, no problems. But CSS, there was no border. Tailwind, I can. And this feels fantastic because I can even picture in my head how something is working. And you can do too. If you learn this a little bit, see something and you can just say, oh, this will be looking like this, or maybe this needs a little bit more padding. Padding 2 is probably not enough. And you'll get there. And that's cool. That's cool both for designers, for developers, it's great. And components overall are great building blocks. So even if you decide in the end, traditional CSS is no Tailwind for me, components are really great building blocks, and design systems are as well. Shout out also to the session from John Alban on Tailwind on there earlier on Monday, and there he essentially built, shown a little bit of how you can use CSS variables to build design systems similar to Tailwind. I'm still a Tailwind fan, but if that's not your forte, there's another approach you can use. But Tailwind is essentially never write CSS again. You can style a complete site without writing a single line of CSS. You can combine utility classes to the most complex layout, and Tailwind really wants you to create HTML with classes. That's the drawback. So, because that means you need to control the markup a little bit. And that's a challenge with Drupal. But we found a nice solution. So Tailwind and React is like a dream combination, because if you have a decoupled application, you have full control about the markup. But that's not really low code. React is nicely split in components, but React is not no code. So it's really not for us here today. But if you want to have a really simple React that is without tooling, without having to learn lots of JavaScript, without things, just getting some things done, then try Preact and HTML. That's the closest to low-code React that you can get. We're using that in production and it works wonderfully. No tooling needed. It's as simple as edit Drupal behavior. It just works. So Drupal is backend first. That's a real problem. So Morten DK has been saying since 2011 and longer, I want to control the markup. I want no diffs everywhere. And Drupal is just like, nope, you're not getting that. And so the render tree theme system is very concept friendly. That's a huge advantage of it. But it's really, really hard to control the markup in a logical way. And this Drupal theming still is, in my opinion, much too hard. And I've helped implement Twig into Drupal core. This has made things easier. And we have class theme. This has made things easier. But I still don't think it's enough. I don't want to lose people to Squarespace, to WordPress, etc. just because something like theming is easier. And really, someone builds a whole site building, and then theming it all ends. That's so sad. We don't want that. So theme suggestions is the markup is split across many templates all over the place. That's also a problem. Like with Drupal, you have like little snippet here, little component here, little thing here. It's just a little bit too granular. And that comes a little bit from its history of PHP template, where you really wanted that, and then the theme functions originally. So this dates back to Drupal 5. And there's also this problem that a site builder can add new things arbitrarily. So a theme template always needs to deal with that, and that's a little bit hard. So decoupled is front-end first, Drupal is back-end first, but we can make Drupal front-end first, and let's do that. One approach I presented in 2019 in DrupalCon Amsterdam, we're just adding a data method to all objects and the data that's passed to the theme system. It has not happened yet, but I've made huge progress on it just with this, what I will be showing later. And then there's UI patterns, which is very pattern lab heavy, so you can create a theme completely outside of Drupal, which is really great. I love that part. And then you integrate it via UI patterns to do lots of mapping, etc. There's presentations on that, really great presentations from the last DrupalCon. Check it out, it's really cool. And we'll be integrating with UI patterns too, because there's so many things built out already thanks to component blocks by Laravel. But you need to create those YML files for every theme hook, and it kinda is again going out of the site building thing. So the small steps we did was the first attempt was on 10 bicycles come on session on Monday. We added Tailwind and Alpine, and we added classes directly to views, field group, field fermenters, etc. And there's essentially 3 ways in how you can integrate with Layout Builder with this more naive approach, I would say. We essentially created components like this turn tagline component. Then we have those classes where you can directly add Tailwind classes around a Layout Builder thing. And then we have styles. And it's really as simple as you configure your content block, you add a class, you click update, and the block is styled that way. Really nice. And then you have those components, and components are the thing I tried out there. Because my goal and my dream was there to build a site without it. But let's quickly talk about Layout Builder classes. So you have amazing flexibility. You can decouple the inner content from the outer presentation, so it's suitable for translation. Of course, you can add HTML everywhere into the blogs, etc. But then when you want to translate it, you have to do everything again. That's a huge advantage of Layout Builder essentially and Layout Builder translation. Because if you're just translating little snippets of text with no markup, then translation will be really simple in that. But if you don't doing that, then it could be a little problem. So the drawback obviously is you have lots of repetitions. You need to repeat the same plots all over again. Then you have Layout Builder styles, which already exists as a contributed module. Really great module. You map style to classes directly. The problem is all the styles are global, so you end up with lots of checkboxes, and maybe you don't want that. And then you have Layout Builder components. It was my own approach. You grab the blocks with components in the free text field. You decouple the inner content from the outer presentation, so it's suitable for translation again. But it's not really no code. I'm showing it to you anyway. So my idea was to create a complex page completely via components. So create it completely outside of Drupal, pure PHP, platform agnostic, could even be translated to JavaScript, decoupled on the back end. That's the thing. So React, like we have the function component turn tagline, and this is really similar to how a React component would like. And I'm using this very special syntax that I came up with after multiple hours of experimenting with different syntaxes of how you can make PHP look a little bit like those inline templating engine that you're seeing in JavaScript. And this out of EOF syntax is the simplest I came up with. Obviously, Twig would also be a possibility, but I really want to try to build React in PHP. And yeah, here doc, exactly. And the nice thing about the here doc is you don't have to deal with the quotings because the only thing that's essentially escaped is this special syntax with $, and that's exactly what you want. That's really cool. So I can call one component from another. I call it the turn tagline. I use the children tagline as text essentially, and then I can build here my thing. And with that way, I can call all the components essentially, and I can build a complete landing page like the accessory page. I could completely build without Layout Builder, really quick, just in PHP with Tailwind, automatic reloading in preview. And then I had a nice full page, and that was just great. Browser proxy was used for doing automatic reloading. Poor PHP performance is really great. And then I had just set a custom menu callback to show me the preview of the page, and later we integrated it with Layout Builder. Worked mostly fine, except for a little bit of field formatters, but we're coming to them a little bit later. So it worked, but it's not really no code. It's more for JavaScript developers that want to write PHP. Integration with Layout Builder was using this content block and sections. That's a new module, and it will be out tomorrow, not for production, but Layout Builder components. It's a dev release, but I think it's still a very powerful approach. First attempt. So in summary, we have a free text field to call any component function. We have the Layout Builder styles to define a style, and we have the the last thing, the mapping to some classes, and then we have arbitrarily defined the class on the blocks. So free text style mapping with predefined styles, also export to configuration, and then the classes on the blocks. And we could definitely merge this layout builder classes also out tomorrow into layout builder styles. We ping on our Twitter, I'll ping on my own Twitter, and we'll just give you a heads up when that's all out. But there was another dream for me, and the dream was you see a menu and you enable the contextual link and you click edit component, you change some class and preview changes, you save and it's done. Wow, change implemented. So that you can essentially really use this part of you see something that you don't like, you edit it, you change it, and it's done. That's my dream. And the Tailwind-based theme is perfect for that, obviously, because you don't like orange, you put in red, it's done. And so those changes are all stored as configuration, and then just override the theme ranks to templates. And you can also override theme suggestions. That would be really cool. And you can map more complex entity fields to the component fields. That's another goal. So that if you have like a complex entity and you wanna not just use layout builder and build that layout with layout builder, but you have something a little bit more design centric, where you build several things together, and then you should be able to do that. And that's why we integrate with UI patterns. And thanks to Ivan, Chi on Drupal and Lucas, who presented this presentation before, and Tech1 Consulting, this is reality. We are so close. This is I just posted it to my sandbox for now, but it will be on Drupal.org. Project component library. We already registered the namespace. It's out now. You can test it out. Just install the module essentially, enable it, go to the component library. That was what I was shown before, like this thing. And this is integrated with the UI patterns for easy mapping. It's still work in progress. Some things like it will change. For example, the UI patterns integration will probably be more like that we are doing this, we are a different config entity, but it's a great start. So there's not yet, we still need some magic naming, and some templates are still scattered, and it would be cool if we had this data interface, but it's a great start. So let's take a look at a demo. So here we are again in our Umami. And if we go back to home in our Umami and click, at some point we are seeing the nice first recipe. As soon as it takes my click. And what I'll be showing you essentially is that from the component library, let me quickly allow you to view the toolbar always, because now we are in full screen and toolbar. Okay, cool. And now we click back on the home page. It's already loading. There we go. And we have this nice, super easy to share pasta bake recipe. And this is what I use essentially to make it a little bit nicer. So, I mean, Umami is a really great thing. No one can make it nicer, obviously. Shout outs to those that made such a great demo theme. I love it. I love it for demos. It's fantastic. So we just have to wait a moment here. TF today is a little bit slow. It's probably just because I'm screen sharing. But we'll see. Oh, and here we are. So normally Umami just have this recipe category, main cursors, the tags, and all of that. But now we have here also something more nice. So I put the recipe category, the tags, and the description essentially into a little tags component, like preview component, that is giving this a completely new thing. And now what I can do is I can essentially click here on a contextual link. In theory. In this case, we have to edit to enable them all. Just wait a moment. Okay, I'll continue talking. So we're loading. So this allows us, and what we essentially need to do is this entity has those three categories. We have the recipe category, we have the tags, and we have the description. And the now we are loaded. I hope that works. Response. Okay. We're just gonna exit it really quick and just do reload it again. And maybe just directly go into the component library instead. So what would have happened here is that I can select this component directly via a contextual link, but it didn't like me. So what we're going to do is we're going to the component library, and we're looking at it here, and we're just clicking edit here on the recipe category text and description block. And once we edit it, just have to wait a quick moment for it to load. And then we can see how we build this little template here ourselves. And again, we're using the nice Tailwind classes. So we have again our code. So, and this is essentially the module I was just talking about, the component library. So you can just have a component library, you find all your components there, and then you just use that. So what we have here now is I put like the category title and the tags in here, like with the title, and then essentially I put here category.title and tag.title. I'm going through the tags here, and here's my little description. And again, we can preview this. And here's our description that we already saw. And now again, we could change the colors essentially. And this is a much simpler template than what you've seen in Drupal. And there was a really great question in the chat, essentially, if you couldn't make it like a little inline editing tool that you could directly, on the preview there down below, could change the class. And that would definitely be fantastic, because then you would know where you are. What we could also do is here in the editor, we could have like little buttons for color. Then you could select one of the Tailwind colors, like from the design system from your designer. And this would then all be working great. But again, I can change this. Let's just put a red background here, and also a red background if you hover it. So if I want to just change the first item, because it should be a little bit more like that, then I can do that. And now I have here my design change implemented. And these are classes, and yes, it's definitely overwhelming at first, but give it time, learn it, and you'll love it. I love it myself. And so if you now take a look at how this is all hooked up in Layout Builder, we just go here to the layout. And now in the Layout Builder, we just have to wait in a moment. We can essentially just configure this block. Here we go. This is our little link. Now we wait. This is essentially, here's our contextual link I wanted to show earlier, where we can essentially directly edit the tab, edit the component. Then we can go back and imagine that implement with quick edit, like little pop-up showing up, change something, update, you see it on screen. Nice. There's so much more possible. I mean, Drupal already is so great in giving you like previews directly. If I now configure this blog, I update, I get a preview from there. And we can do so much more with the theme layer now as well. So this will be really cool. And now what I've essentially done here is that I have here we have the different categories. We have the recipe category, and we have the tags, and the source is coming from, and we have the summary, and then we have a field formatter and such things. And here we have data label. So essentially, for every one of my previous things, for everything that I put in, like in my data structure here, it kind of automatically sees and registers those as UI patterns. And once it has those registered, then you can choose them here to map things from the entity to the template directly. This is UI patterns, this is component blocks module. So those two modules essentially make that possible. So if I add a new variable here, it would, and then I have to clear cache right now still, but that will be fixed. Then it would show up there in the configure blocks, and I could add a new thing to that part. That's really cool because I can do that. Just waiting real quick. There we go. So yeah, here I can essentially change the recipe category, the source, the formatter, and can see there's all those entity things available. Yeah, this section recording will be shared later, and is probably also the final one that will be ending up in the recording area of that, because I don't really want what's the mess that we had before ending up as the final version. So that's really not the thing. So I also have some questions prepared that we have in the session. To answer them real quick, I probably need to make that a little bit larger so that it's even visible. And it's probably the other way around. So yeah, let's answer some questions. So is there a particular time to choose anti-reference revisions or anti-reference, or a time to definitely not use one of the other? I don't know. If you like anti-references, then that's a good idea. Revisions in general are a good idea in general. If you want revisions, I suggest to use workspaces. Custom theme over basic theme, or put CSS and blocks and views, and if you don't have access to the backend. I think it's fine to add CSS and blocks and views, or even better, if you have everything template-based, component-based, just edit the component. How does Tailwind compare to just with Bootstrap? It's essentially an build your own Bootstrap thing. So it's yeah, a design system that you can use for that. At what point does it become no code? Are the components accessible to content creators through some kind of selection menu? What you see is what you get. Yes. In general, the components, every component created is a UI pattern, so it's available in views, it's available in layout builder. If you use display suite, you can use it because this directly registers with UI patterns. UI patterns is already so great in helping site builders do it. This is really just the last bridge for doing that. So the strategy is twofold. One fold is to allow UI patterns to shine and really be what you see is what you click. But the other part is that you can, that I hope that essentially wherever there's a Drupal template, you can just right click and then you say, I really would like this one to be editable, and yeah, those should be good in that. So this field maybe contemplate meets trick. Is that fair? Yeah, it's totally fair. It's contemplate was a really great approach. There's also a trick field, which is cool to check out. And there's also, if someone likes this more markup-based approach, what was it called? I have to check later again, but there's another module by Ivan that allows to essentially build it's like a layout builder, but just with pure code, also with code mirror, etc. So this is really cool. Have you considered reducing the interaction with markup, somewhat clean markup, site builder, Sethaven cluster, editing place? Yeah, I like that a lot. We have to see what we can do there. But my main next step idea is essentially you can not only create like little components, but now imagine adding a little form builder to that. And now allowing some configuration, like some color or things like that. And then for every form builder, UI patterns already has a component. But again, you have to do that in YML, where you can define like complex things with colors, etc. There's also a component module, which does the same for JavaScript. But let's put all those approaches together and essentially have a little form builder for this component library. And then you build your form, or even define it in YAML if you can't find a form builder to do it fast. And then you could not only write templates, but you could write template builders. And I think that would be the most cool thing, because then you can essentially allow someone that is placing the template and hooking it up with layout builder to not only choose a variation, but also configure variation. UI patterns essentially have already everything for that. It's just a matter of building it, hooking it up, and doing that. Assume this export into a configuration YAML handled as source control. How do you handle revisions for those using the editor to revert if needed? Maybe talk about workflow. Yeah, that happened to me as well. So when I was preparing this demo, was one time like I really would like to go back. So there was one time the idea of using a content entity instead of a configuration entity, and it's a little bit of a trade-off. Config entity is really great for exporting and doing that like that, but yeah, you don't have revisions. But config entity, content entity would have revisions, would have full control, but it's not as easily exportable and shippable unless you use default content, which feels a little bit thing. So maybe we need some more innovation there. So that would be the thing. So all questions answered. That's great. By now, hopefully, we have here our blog back. Yes, we have. And I want to show a little bit more of the component library, if it lets me. So we click on the component library. Again, this is like our library that we have here, and we have this. And I have a simple Alpine example too. So I promised I would show something about how Alpine works. This is now. Alpine essentially allows you to not only style your site, but also add interactivity without writing a single line of JavaScript. And I think this is a pretty great thing, because here we have a very simple example. And again, I say most people can learn it. If you're able to learn how to add a field, and or you know a little bit of coding, but really are not into this hardcore coding, etc., then Alpine is like a nice middle ground. It's low code. It's not no code. But again, we could build plugins for building those things. So yeah, but here's how you do a very little Alpine example. So what I've built here is essentially, let's click on the preview, is a little application where you have a little click me button, a select country button, and if I click select country, what happens is it then shows me here that this little menu has some hover styles, and then I can select country and it goes away again, or click away and it goes away. So and the and it's very simple to do. So we just have x data equals open false, then we have a click open true, and then we have x showed open equals true and click away open equals false. And that's it. That's our interactive application, the first one. And the nice thing is, and then there's just a little trick, easy to learn, and that's already it of what this is about. So if we go back to our component library, I have a little bit more extensive example too. And this extensive example is showing how you can Alpine use for a little bit more complex things. So we have here this this test Alpine, which is a more complex Alpine example. And it's so cool, this component library. I think we need a little bit, we need a tag or something to organize it, and then be able to sort it or organize it better, or even make it content, and then like views in the old days, like was content and then it was configuration when you exported it. We'll find it that way, I'm sure about it. So again, we have here our nice Alpine example, but here I added a little twist. I added a preview true just to the preview data. And this preview true is obviously only available if I'm previewing this. If I'm later using this component somewhere, it's not. Then I can add some little debug here. So I can, for example, show the if the country menu open or is the country selected, and then I'm just showing where the Alpine directive xtext open and xtext selected this thing. So we go down and we click preview. And after a short moment, there's our Alpine application. And again, we select country, and I select Germany or Switzerland, where I'm right now. Hi from Switzerland. And you can see here's again my interactive application. And you can do so many things with Alpine, again, with little code, just low code. And that's just great. Last thing I want to show today, and I'm glad we're re-recording this because it's getting really late. And it would have been kicked out by our organizers long ago. So maybe it's for the best. So we have a very nice demo. I made it possible to essentially override the main menu. So for now, I've chosen this magic naming scheme, Drupal overrides __, and then menu main is the template you're overriding. And essentially, I just edit it. And yeah, and obviously it's possible to embed one component into another component. Right now you would use like a Twig syntax for that component library item, and then you pass through it. But I hope still that we can do something like, I'll do that live here in a moment. I hope still that we can do something like x my nice header. And then, for example, just passing through the menu title, which is menu name. So we would title equals menu name. And that's using this syntax essentially, or maybe we want something like this to make it valid Twig syntax. And then we pass this essentially, and then we call the x my nice header thing. And then we pass in the menu name, and then you have one component in another. So again, this goes back to the original thing that you build up all your components in singular, then you build one component that you never embed somewhere, where you just put everything together. All the components have preview, so you have a full landing page completely built in the browser, and just by embedding one component in another. And I think that's a pretty cool thing. So I remove that again. I don't think the preview would like it, if it lets me. And then again, we can click preview. Hopefully it took my thing. And there we go. There at the bottom, we can now see home, articles, recipes, etc. And this now is exactly like our home menu. And if I change this now, then my menu within the Drupal would change as well, because really bad performance. It's I'm not going to do that right now. But essentially, this here at the top would change, and this will also allow it to have another little contextual link, and then you can just click edit, and I'll demo that again some other time. I don't want to get this long, but yeah, that's it. But yeah, and this essentially have a site builder statement, edit any template directly from the UI, change it, export configuration, you're done. With special naming right now still on meshing name, but yeah, I think this has lots of cool potentials. So as we have some people here in chat, are there any more questions? Like Dan or Bernardo. Dan, you were making like a little face. Doesn't matter. You can watch the recording, Dan. Yeah, that's cool. Anyway, if anyone still has a question, I already answered the question from the other session, so just put it in chat, and it would be cool. Dan, aren't you the person that is doing Drupal Celebrate, or am I mistaking right now? Hey, you are. Cool. It's so fun. I featured your theme as one of the first payment themes before in the presentation, so that's really cool. Yeah. Actually, I used your theme as a starter kit for server sites first, and then we built our own. Oh, there's also, let me put that in chat. Yeah, definitely should update to that, but I put that in chat. There's GitHub.com lines ad, which is my own username for some agency, and there's a Tailwind Umami theme now. This is essentially just Umami, Tailwind based on Umami. It just overlays it. That's kind of what you see in here. But there's also out in the part. So this is actually a Tailwind theme layered over the Umami theme with several pre-processing that Tailwind does removed. Was a little bit tricky with button styles, but it gave overall the best demo. So yeah, cool. Anyway, yeah, follow us, twitter.com/FabianFrance, twitter.com/Tech1Consulting. Follow our blog, tech1consulting.com/blog. We'll also be doing some more YouTube videos on that, demoing everything out of it till we have achieved the stream of making site building finally much easier. I will be cutting the recording here, but then for you, as you joined a little bit late, so essentially what I'm doing is I have this component library. I maybe we'll use this as a quick summary. And essentially in this component library, I can create components, which are essentially theme hooks in the end. We are UI patterns. And no, components isn't used. It's component underscore library. The code is right now still on GitHub. There we go. Right now I need to use this URL, but it will be in component library soon. Be using it for a client. It's just great. So essentially what I can do is I can just add a component here or add a library item. I can, or just using my test here now. And the cool thing is, that's really ugly here now, but I can essentially just use, for example, if I say, essentially define here some preview data, then I have my template here, then I click preview. And then this is showing me this little component here I built really. But if I want to, for example, say, hey, this gray is really too dark, then I can just make it lighter. And coolest would be obviously if it was updating in real time, but preview for now it is. And then I can say, hey, this should also be a little bit darker now, and so I can really style things in the browser and then do it like this. So it's really cool. Now it looks like disabled. But yeah, this is essentially the essence, and if you combine it with Alpine, you can even write detective applications. You probably saw that part. Dan, did you see the part with Alpine? Just answer yes or no.
So there was a yes.
Cool. Yeah, and with Layout Builder okay, it's open. Yeah, cool. Yeah, and with Layout Builder, essentially you can both edit the template here, the component here directly from the form, but you can also configure the block here and then do the mapping like with UI patterns normally. So it's cool.
Thank you, Fabian. This is truly some revolutionary, game-changing stuff. As you mentioned, shout out to all of the other Tag 1 developers who collaborated with you. And I also wanted to give recognition to the clients we're working with who inspired this work. I won't mention names for NDA purposes, but anyone who's listening, you know who you are.